Our next speaker is Mason Boone, whose speech topic he will be informing us about is the villainous archetypes and their importance to media.
Let's step away from the real and let's get fake for a second. Now, how many of you realize that there are 11,000 villains between the DC and Marvel comic universes alone? That is an absurdly large number. Batman alone has his own top 100 villain list. That's absurd. I was researching for this and it got me thinking. How can they have so many different individual and unique villains? And the answer is quite simple. They can't. A lot of these villains boil down to basic archetypes. So I developed my own list of 6 individual villain archetypes that I think kind of define every type of villain in media. And so I'm going to teach you about each one of those today, and I'm also going to teach you why they actually matter. Now, starting off with the goofiest out of all of them is the mustache twirler. These are your Gargamels from the Smurfs or Dick Dastardly from the Wacky Racers. They're the more one-dimensional villains. They're very goofy and quirky and weird, and they're bad for the sake of being bad. They don't necessarily have much motivation behind them. It's more just, I am bad and that is my character trait. Now, I'll actually get into why it is important that that is the case later on. I will follow it up with the mirror villain. Now, the mirror villains are kind of, in my opinion, the laziest form of writing a villain. It is more or less the hero, but in a color swap. It is kind of a dark mirror of the main character, and this is actually shown very perfectly with Venom, where it is more these characters that are just meant to be an evil version of the superhero, mainly reserved for evil clones, or in Star Trek's case, parallel universes, etc., etc. Following up with that is my personal favorite, the foil. Now, the foil villain, think about it in terms of the mirror. If the mirror is is 2 sets of parallel lines, the foil is an X, where at one point they kind of meet a very similar situation that could have pushed them either to be good or evil, and they start to diverge into different paths. The Joker being probably one of my best examples of this, as he is just as smart as Batman, but he's crazy, whereas Batman's more stoic and heroic. He's more random and chaotic, and that kind of leads to like this great dichotomy between these characters. Now, following off of that is the disillusioned villain. These are villains that more would swear to you that they are the hero of this story, that everything that they do is justified. This is your Thanos, your Handsome Jack, your Principal Ed Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they think that everything that they do is actually for the good of everybody else. And that kind of creates this is where more sympathetic villains come from. Much like our main man Villainous right here, which I'm pretty sure most people in this room are pretty much accustomed to. Now, following that is the anti-hero. Now, the anti-hero is kind of a strange one in the sense that this is a villain that isn't really a villain. These are more bad guys that do good things, or good guys that do really bad things. Much like Deadpool right here. A normal hero has a set of morals, a moral compass, a code that they live by. These characters are more gray area. They're the characters that are not afraid of killing or being bad if it's for the right reasons. John Wick is a perfect example of this, as he shot up several nightclubs over the course of 3 movies, but did it all to stop the mob. He is the perfect depiction of an anti-hero, much like Deadpool. Now, for the final and weirdest category out of all of them, the inhuman villains. Now, this was originally 2 categories that I kind of pushed together because there was enough of an overlap for purpose for that to make sense. Non-human villains are villains that are, quite frankly, not human. They're villains that are either environmental or just plain alien to us, much like the Xenomorph from Alien, the Daleks from Doctor Who, or the board game from Jumanji. They're more meant as more of an antagonist rather than a villain, something to stop the main character rather than a villainistic force. Now, we need your all help with this one really quickly.
Why should I care?
That is an amazing question. Now, the reason that you should care is because each of these different types of villains actually affects the stories that they are in very different and very deep ways. The mustache twirler, while being kind of a goofy, one-dimensional villain, is meant to teach you the difference between good and evil. If you have a one-dimensional bad-to-be-bad villain, you have a great one-dimensional good-to-be-good hero. It starts to actually show that line between black and white, this good and bad dichotomy. The mirror villain is kind of meant to also act as this, but in a deeper level, to actually show you that there are people that can be bad, just like the main character. That there are these dichotomies, that there are these struggles between these characters. The foil is actually meant to explore this deeper and actually show the in-depth depictions of these characters. It's meant to dissect the actual writing of these characters at their base most elements. The disillusioned hero is so you can actually see the blurriness of that black and white line. So you can see characters that are actually sad or think that what they're doing is right, and you can actually start to wonder who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. The anti-heroes are meant to show that that line can be crossed, that characters can step from light to dark and back again. It's not a set-in-stone method. And then finally, the non-human. They're meant to show that humanity can overcome. That these different characters, regardless of what they face, can actually be overcome by humanity. The best example is the xenomorph from Alien, an unkillable killing machine whose only instinct is to hunt and kill and reproduce. Should not be able to be killed by anybody in those movies, yet we managed to do it. Now, why do all of these different villains matter? And why is this important? It's really simple. Because without villains, we wouldn't have heroes. The reason that all of these different villains exist is so that way we can have heroes to overcome. Stephen King once said that we create horror and terrible monsters so that because we have an aversion to these, that we have this dark perversion to love this horror and being scared. I don't think that's right. I think that we create these monsters and we create these villains and we create these in-depth characters so that way we know that we'll win after those credits roll. That the minute that we turn off the movie or shut off our phones, that we as humans can succeed in the end. That regardless of what happens, regardless of what force that we think is there, regardless of what undescribable horror, regardless of how bad the person is, good will rise. That people will rise. That humanity is good, and we are better than whatever monsters or fears or personifications of these issues that we can throw against ourselves. So why do villains matter? Why do all of these random archetypes that I talked about matter? It's simple. So that we can make heroes to stop